at the base of the spine in the Muladhara chakra be released to rise through the other chakras to the 1,000-petaled lotus of the brain, which opens into transcendental consciousness, samadhi. For the West, that terraced ascent is incarnate in the vaultings of Gothic, an upward raising of stone by downward gravity, of which Hegel makes a symbol. Thus the passions fortify a position for right and order against themselves. Between gravity and spirit, inert and vital, determinism and freedom, is there a natural stair? The fragments of a coral beach define a base, nature morte, unorganized as Lucretius' atoms, those shards of ships he pretended would come together. On Margate sands I can connect nothing with nothing. Against that mere aggregate. The crystals of true atoms, where inner structure reaches up through electron bonds to the lattice shown in these cadmium sulfide etch pits, are already workingly alive. But the ties have found too soon the perfect order of the hexagon. Between atoms and macrocrystal there are no thresholds, no subdivisions of the vital chain. If entropy is disorder, this is a spectre of the contrary required. In this three-dimensional model, the protein myoglobin seems to have bridged the field between disorder and form, a polymer both unique and periodic, a structured complexity of 2,600 atoms in coils of amino acid and other links around a molecule of iron, ready to play a living part in storing oxygen in the muscles. How much we could learn of structure, as of thought and society, from this product of a search which polymerized the primal seas. In 1932, said Calder, a wooden globe gave me the idea of making a universe, something like the solar system. That's where the whole thing came from. He calls this mobile Little Spider. But whether centipede, tree, galaxy, or macromolecule is left unclear, provided it catch the swing of life in what must remain a machine, the parts, by Leibniz's criterion, not machines ad infinitum. Compare it with the curves we trace in nature, as Pythagoras found the outcrop of tone ratios, and made number the first principle of things. It is not such a Kantian wonder. Our equations describe what occurs. Conics here dark blue, how bodies move in force fields. Sinusoids here red, how motions spread in the elastic. The green of growth and decay, change proportional to size, as wrapped on itself a spiral, and the bell curve, orange and black, bell born on Halloween, the distribution formed in a one many, both tending to center and tending to spread. If each globe of dew outlining this spider's web were of elastic ether, it would draw to a point and spread to all. Let that Gaussian curve oscillate. It becomes a damped wave, the electron set at the base of nature like a mystic one. Every force play hints at that, this orbed mesh hung in the catenaries of triangular tension, such the adaptive geometries of soul and world. So the spiral nautilus, with a fossil forebear from 90 million years ago. If cells divide at a rate, he will grow like compound interest. Curl him round a point. His shell is a logarithmic spiral, but it is not pure. He began as a finite creature, and his growth must end. Einstein's math not certain as referred to reality, or if certain, it does not refer. But what do we mean by refer but that, the congruence of metaphor, though of course on the spectrum that leads from science to myth, the knowledge of things unseen. The early Greek mind caught it all in one, like a god in marble. Empedocles, here first the four roots of all things, bright Zeus, fire, life-giving Hera, air, Idoneus, earth, and Nestis, water, who moistens the springs of men with her tears. Those elements are archetypal in thought and world. Our science found 92, now more, but the Greek four remained, cutting across ours as change of state. Earth as solid, water liquid, vapor air. We tried to stop there, but could not avoid, as the sun fire came to earth, an ionized fourth, plasma. and still they go round in the wheel of transformations. Heraclitus, fire lives the death of earth, air the death of fire, water the death of air, and earth of water. But when one sees in Chiapas at the end of rainless winter and the burning season how the sun sets through a haze where everything goes to flame, the four yield to the first. The greatest of these is fire, from which things come and to which they will return. Already the whirl where the supreme itself is a pole, Ormads and Ahriman, entropic up and down, fire through the fabric of leaves, the tiger stalking herds. What structures underlie the polar states? Plato stressed number, the triangular pyramid of fire, the 20-sided icosahedron of water. Bernal at the University of London spent his life searching that way. Against the regular coherence of crystals built on space-filling lattices of 3, 4, 6, he found the clue to the liquid state, irregular but coherent, incompressible but shifting, in the number 5, pentagonoids, which could never fill space without sliding one on another. So the old myth of water as life source would bring from those always failing and slipping fives these floating petalled forms. With radiolaria and starfish, alien to the inert perfection of the mineral. In the tenfold star of this computer graphic image of DNA left, oxygen red, carbon green, nitrogen blue, phosphorus yellow, and beside it a section through the composite bud of hawksbeard, it is as if we saw from chromosome to flower the upwelling of the pentagonal. As Thoreau says of the leaf forms in thawing clay, no wonder that the earth expresses itself outwardly in leaves, it so labors with the idea inwardly. So nature labors with number. Every one by in and out becomes a dyad, oblate dividing star, head and tail of paramecium, worm, fish. Where Pythagoras' female too opens, it must leave a birth gulf between. 3. The flower trillium, or in this Precambrian fossil, unlike anything we know, an attempted animal pinwheel of 3 tentacled arms. 4 is everywhere, the Timaeus cube for earth, Plato's most solid form, this barite crystal, bonded like the post and lintel temple, or stable quadrate Rome. There are 4s in flowers too, cornel, with its 4 white bracts, though it may leaf and fruit in 5s. Then the tyranny of frost. There they lie, writes Thoreau, like the wrecks of chariot wheels after a battle in the skies, these glorious spangles, the sweepings of heaven's floor, and they sing, melting as they sing, of the mystery of the number 666. But suppose they change their tune as they thaw from the rigor of 6 to a deeper mystery, the fluctuant, all-mothering 5, this icicle lapsing down to a drop, pulsing as it falls. Over that change of state Earth's life and climate hangs, the great specific heat, the heat of fusion, the saving wonder that water grows denser as it cools, sinking in convection until 4 degrees centigrade, then rises, expanding to the insulating shell of ice. Not only ice skaters bank on that film. To avoid the Germanic dialectic of opposites, William James seized on plasticity, as with water slowed to a gel, hung between flux and form. The laws of nature he saw with Peirce as the fixed habits of matter, and we were fixing ours under the infinitesimals of will. Organic matter, he writes, seems endowed with a very extraordinary degree of plasticity. Those spiraling chains of polymers culminating in the genetic molecule of DNA have brought the paradox of inertia to a creative threshold. They move by resisting, they continually change and hold. At one limit, the horseshoe crab has settled in for 300 million years. At the other, some strange unrest has pushed toward new orders before the last have spent themselves, from sea to land, to lurching dog-toothed reptile, to mammals biding their time through the expansion of dinosaurs. Then, as Teilhard de Chardin says, and we read it in the expression of this Indian lion-tailed macaque, work. In the case of the primates, evolution went straight to work on the brain. Can the whole transcend without reduction of the parts? Even the growing tip of an onion root rests on cell alignments which seem almost crystalline, until we note the cell nuclei in all stages of mitosis and chromosome replication, the one many raised from abstract to a vital mix of generation in the tensile one. Evolution walks a knife edge, where each collective tends to harden like coral reef, hive, or swarm. So weaver ants, in a triumph of caste breeding and cooperation by chemical and tactile signals, turn themselves into a chain to fold a leaf, which they will use their own web-secreting larvae to sew. Each myrmidon has paid the price of togetherness, as like, you would say, as the leaves of a tree. Yet these to the right come from one water oak growing in the Mississippi yard of my childhood, visibly stretched between Spanish and willow oak, while various oaks are sampled on the left. When scientists who refuse to think say molecules of a kind are all alike, they mean we do not yet distinguish them. But as Leibniz knew, no formed thing or moment can have the configuration of any other. From those generic dogma words, table and chair, to species and period styles, it is a question of abstracting the forms which crown the relative. The honeycomb, even of wild bees, suggests the repetitive mechanization of the hive, the whole insect freezing as into hexagons. But what of the moral and individual bee? Navigating by solar coordinates, with his spatial sense and interior clock externally corrected, or when he returns to the hive to report his flower find by the fun-frisch dance, in which distance is given by the number of dance loops, direction by the angle at which he cuts across, quantity of nectar by body waggles as he cuts. Instinct. We mouth it as a dog a dry bone, but inwardness is there, with memory and choice, Blake's vast world of delight, closed to your senses five, though our senses give us the clue. Think of Quincy Wright's metal masses rising against gravity and coming down across the ocean. The physicist traces air pressure under the wing against downward weight. The laws are in order. The chemist the energy of fuel against propulsion, all determined, no purpose there, nothing unexplained but some minute forces applied to levers in the pilot's cabin. Here the physiologist takes over, tracing energies through the body, carbon cycle, triphosphate, as in Leibniz's mill. Everything is accounted for, but for some negligible nerve signals as the muscles contract. Now the neurologist, and he finds entropy and conservation everywhere preserved, except perhaps for third-order infinitesimals at the synapses of the nerves. The flight of the plane has been mechanically accounted for, Wright says, except for something like an infinite regress of infinitesimals, yet the whole was according to plan. Soul, a hazardous inference from patterns of energy, where each energy is in turn such an inference from such configuration, has been hunted down layer after layer of the organic stair. But it is just the feedback organization of that stair which triggers soul's choice. As we approach the unorganized, statistical cancellation yields predictive law. Look down in the noon rush at a New York intersection. Count the numbers going in each direction, each on his own, sponte sua. You cannot predict for the individual any more than for electrons in a wire, but you can write a current equation which from day to day will hold rather well, until an army comes, marching behind a leader. He turns, they follow. The statistical laws are broken. Organization has loosened determinacy. We seem almost in touch with the complementarity shared by nature and mind. Yet even physical lightning, like a Bach fugue, cuts the creative path of history, an indeterminate solution in the determinizing field. The friction belts of rain build up the potential to its breaking point of 100 to 1,000 million volts. But the precise when and where rest on the particular of some Napoleon ion, building its chance momentum to a surge that creates more, starting the bolt down, though it zigzags at every unpredictable crisis of pressure and the velocity of another leader ion. It delivers the charge, which overshoots and in microseconds strikes back up and down the now blazed path. Embryology repeats phylogeny, though even there sometimes breaking away. No absolute congruencies in space or time. So Bach's last fugue forges the inevitable, but so uniquely that what he left unfinished must remain that way. Thought abstracts to the stripped antinomies, while nature elaborates its nets between. Rete mirabile, the beating pulse of a chick embryo furrowing the yolk with vessels, bringing back nutrients to build the form. In the enigmatic marriage of essence and relationship, we see in a richer whole what Leibniz saw when he wrote, according to this system, bodies act as if, to suppose the impossible, there were no souls, and souls act as if there were no bodies, and yet both body and soul act as if each were influencing the other. The last clause feeds science, such an organism as the embryo itself, to map the complex of thresholds and feedback relays of enzymes and organizers by which both whole and part evolve. But the cosmos is the embryo, and every grouping in it, swung in a great catenary from the limit of inert aggregate toward self-determining transcendence. For in every grouping, to some degree, the organized whole passes what could have been predicted from the parts. Even this Caribbean hurricane, photographed from Apollo 8, is a form through which material swirls. If it did not hold a kind of self-shaping life of its own, it would not even be real. History is full of those vortices, when chemicals were linking toward polymers, cells toward the metazoan, or now when society swells with the supra-individual and collective. Evolution could not occur if through each grouping incipient soul did not set up its circuits, altering the probability nexus of the parts. 1939 Germany was so organized that when Hitler screamed on the air, those puny decibels threw huge masses of men, tanks, and planes into motion. It is not Kant's separate aspects, phenomena determined and spirit free. The nerve nets of actuation spell out Leibniz as if each were influencing the other. Each does, though each is inferred from the field. In the depths of space, a cluster of galaxies, each comparable to our entire Milky Way with its billions of suns. At these distances, 10 million light-years and beyond, the red shift attests the always swifter expansion of space itself. By the Einstein curvature of that space, the antinomy Kant proved from reason itself that space must be both finite and infinite, has been fused, a curved return of closed infinity. By the suspension between the bang 15 billion years ago and Hoyle's steady state, or perhaps a pulsing oscillation, the polarity of time too stands unresolved, that is, bridged. If we drop with Pascal into the infinitesimal which he could only imagine, we arrive beyond microscope and electron microscope at this scattering of an ion beam from atomic shells in the tip of a tungsten crystal, where everything we have said of crystal alignment comes again to the fore. But these are glints, not atoms. Do they prove that atoms are? We cannot tie down that are. Like everything else, atoms well from situations, in this case rather abstract ones. Newton thought matter could not be hard unless formed of harder atoms, for where else to the causal Eleatic could hardness come from? We must conjure it up, an ingression, from interatomic vacuities by which these ion glints seem crowded. But it is not, as Eddington thought, that the particles are real and the table appearance. Appearance and reality are asymptotes of our experience. So in a cloud or hydrogen bubble chamber, we catch traces of the smaller particles from which those assumed atoms come into and go out of being like jellyfish. Like all the groupings entelechy rides on, these streakers from bottom to top, negative K mesons of 3 billion electron volts from the bevatron, barely bent to the positive right. To the left, one knocks up a proton. Center, an electron dislodged from a hydrogen atom spirals in the field. In other cloud tracks, these two, once called primary, yield to whole families of wave particle evanescences. As Pascal and Leibniz saw, no bottom anywhere. How else, where the axioms are contradictory? Put a spectroscope to the sky. The stars refract in color. Those rainbows magnified bear dark absorption lines, signatures of elements in the stellar atmospheres. They vary with stellar types and temperatures, but the elements turn out the same as ours. Over a cosmos of 1 billion light years and trillions of suns, the building from subparticles to the chemical elements is akin, one form urge everywhere. In the clouds of dust and gas, called nebulae, the spectroscope picks up now the bands of organic radicals, hydroxyl, methane, cyanogen, ammonia, root structures of life. As soon as atoms cool and fill their electron shells, they take up chemistry. You can say no God is needed, or say God is there. Suit your temperament. But the Auger meteorite, which fell in 1864, has carbonaceous chondrules, with what some have called microfossils, suggestive of pre-life. So the same work of building seems to spring everywhere from the nature of things, the divine theatre Bruno saw when he broke the crystalline geocentric spheres. Here, descending from the space-curved hole, we graze our near neighbor, the Andromeda Galaxy, older red giants in the center, and in the elliptical companions, newer stars forming in the spiral arms. In our own similar galaxy we see what must be suns in the making, here in the Lagoon Nebula, in Sagittarius, where the gas and carbon dust collapses to small Bach globules, dark against the background glow. In other hydrogen-rich regions huge shock waves plow through as in a mackerel sky, sowing the cloud lumps from which giant stars fall into glowing. Hydrogen fusion kindled at the compressed and heated core transforms mass into radiation. As Newton had speculated, nature a perpetual circulatory worker. It heaves up through the vast mass, setting the surface as here of the sun, cycloning in promontories of plasma, the radiant from which Earth, sheltered and belied in space, receives the energy for its terraced life. As for the solar system, ejected from the sun or condensed with it from the same cloud, where the old collision theory made it an incredible accident, we, maximizing its likelihood, observe minute perturbations in the motions of nearer stars. And how to have thought it rare, where the great planets too have their systems, Galileo's Jovian satellites, or the moons and planetesimal rings of Saturn. Though we do not know what chemistry has evolved beneath those frozen ammonia and carbon dioxide clouds. No doubt something remote from the life we look for. The hope for planets commensurate with ours has so far let us down. Here is an imaginary landscape of Mars from The Splendor of the Heavens of the 30s, when Schiaparelli and Lowell had drawn the elusive canals, and Edgar Rice Burroughs made the dying planet a seat of romance. Though the cratered waste seen from our space probes had more the look of the moon, no green fields, no canals, and this landscape Viking radioed home, July 1976, has the reality and wonder of desolation. It is not even clear what the search for microorganisms in the soil has revealed. One can still call Sol ubiquitous, but the lurching Mars man is not there. What the Moon, Mars, here Mercury share are the overlaid impact craters where from the start of the solar system meteors of all sizes have gashed down, melting the rock and throwing up mountain walls. Even the Earth, cushioned and eroded by air, has the not too ancient one in Arizona, and from 200 million years ago this 40-mile wide depression still to be traced in the Canadian Shield. But our earth, viewed from the airless and waterless moon, has the look of a paradise, so far as we can tell, though we are prejudiced, the only paradise in this vicinity, ocean and forested land gleaming through its cloud. True, it has natural deserts and its polar north. There the bending in of the magnetic field displays in the colors of the aurora borealis how almost exposed we are to the bombardments of space, the solar wind a flux of charged particles ionizing and fluorescing the air. Exposed, too, to volcanic violence, those great tectonic plates that make up the earth crust, shifting and drifting, crunching one into the other, cracking in flaws, heaving up mountains and lava, this San Andreas fault, which the young rely on at any moment to sink California under the sea. It means something about the balance some call dynamic homeostasis, that from the birth of space rays, the violence of colliding continents, and eruptive orogeny, Earth is so soothed and contained that the age of Goethe and Beethoven could think its mountains the peaceful work of water, slowly carved, as in this more than half-mile leap to the great plain of Venezuela. What an Eden for the self-search, from organic chemistry to social man, of the whole enfolding biosphere. Earth, air, fire, and water. When the volcanic island of Surtsey rose from the ocean south of Iceland, those elements were again proclaimed. And now one remembered Oparin's coasovits, the colloidal droplets he explored as the origins of life. Let the primal seas receive from the reducing pre-oxygen atmosphere of water vapor, methane, ammonia, nitrogen, and the carbon oxides, the various amino acids which Miller and Urey brought from them by electric spark. Let that soup thicken to a gel in the pools of hot volcanic rock. Then rains wash it back into the polymerizing seas. That protonoid rounds as here into microscopic double-membraned osmotic spheres which absorb amino acids, can grow, can bud. Give them 1 billion years in the warm seas, their working molecules trying all the links and ties of carbon synthesis. Enzymes produce starch and maltose by the energy of the glucose-phosphate bond. So came the master invention, the earliest photosynthesis, hydrogen sulfide splitting carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen by the energy of light, transforming the globe from that reducing matrix of polymers to an